Hi, and welcome to Hollywood On-Ramp, the podcast where we interview successful people in Hollywood about how they got to where they are today. I'm Jay Troutman, and today I'm very excited to bring you a conversation with visual effects editor Kim Huston. Kim has worked on movies like This Is 40, The Heat, The Big Short, John Wick Chapter 2, and most recently, Fast 10. But she started out working at a movie theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has a great story about cleaning up the theater during the credit sequence of a movie, and then later working on its sequel with the same crew. Dreams do come true. If you prefer to listen to this interview as a podcast, search for Hollywood On-Ramp in Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoy this interview with Kim, and please subscribe if you do so you'll be notified of future episodes.
I know that this road has been very hard. And yet here you are.
So you've just come off working on Fast 10.
Hello, I did.
As a VFX editor.
Yes.
So what exactly does a VFX editor do?
Basically, we're the liaison between VFX and editorial. Editorial will ask us to do temps, and we'll also kind of check through the cut and make sure when things change. We'll give numbers to every shot and give a new number if it changes, and just sort of like, cut in shots, manage things on the editorial side, but also interface with VFX, whether it's straight to the VFX vendor or with the VFX producing team, just getting a zillion requests from them and questions, answering all of those things. So just kind of like providing material out of editorial and bringing stuff into editorial, and just being like the middle person between both departments.
Okay. So you're, I think when people think of anyone involved in VFX, they think you're like creating VFX shots or doing CG.
No. Yeah, not doing those things. We're not the vendors. We're not the artists per se, although several of us have actually finished shots for whatever projects we're on. But usually, we're just providing all the material to the vendors.
Okay. So like how many shots on a movie like Fast 10 have VFX in them?
So we had 3,000 plus shots, VFX shots. Actually, every shot was numbered, interestingly, on Fast 10. Yeah, so we have a 3D department that they did for the Chinese release, basically. They made it, fully 3D after the fact. So every shot became, if it was a non-VFX shot, we still gave it a number, and it went to actually deneg to carve out so that they could separate the layers and make a 3D shot. So it felt like everything was a shot because everything had a number. But I mean, it was most of it was a VFX shot.
Yeah, I know in my experience, a lot of shots that people would never imagine have visual effects involved have some kind of either like painting out something in the background that wasn't supposed to be there, or when I worked on the Fincher crew, it was like every shot had some kind of stabilization on it.
We see if we can toss those potentially to the DI, but things like weird speed ramps and shake and stabilization sometimes, and just like kind of the more challenging stuff we end up taking on anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
it works out better.
It's like endless stuff.
Right. No, just so that you can like give notes through the VFX review process rather than having something come up like at the last minute in the DI, which is like the final step. Cool. So 3,000 shots. How long did it take you to get through the VFX process?
We started, I came on in June of 2022, which was pretty close to the start. I think it was maybe like a month or something after they had started shooting. And we started turning over certain sections and shots in July, more of it in August, and then we really ramped up in September, late September, I would say, and November. And by the end of the year, we had almost everything pulled. it was kind of like a whirlwind rush there at the end because it was like the end of the year, that is, because it was, all right, we got to pull everything, but also we have to temp everything because we have our first like executive screening coming up too. So we were sort of normally, or hopefully in theory, you would have these phases where you temp and it's like sort of chill, and then you pull everything once you have everything temp so that they can see, you know, what your intention is. And for this one, it was kind of like, all right, everything at once, go. And so we were pulling everything. We were pulling everything for post-viz as well. We were doing temps at the same time. We were like sort of all hands on deck for that even. So it was like pretty much full speed ahead, like starting in maybe like it got real hairy starting in like October and then just went all the way to the end, all the way to April.
April. And now it's May and the movie's about to come out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in like 4 days or whatever.
Yeah. So when you say you're pulling the shots, that means you're like taking the frames that are in the cut and sending them to the vendor, right? For them to do the work.
Yeah, we're pulling all of the media for the vendor, either the plate alone or, you know, the chrome balls and the color chart and all of the other media required as well. So like tiles for the background plates and anything like that. Lots of arrays, driving arrays, lots of stuff like that for this movie.
All the stuff that they did on set to try to make it match, like whatever CG they're doing, match into the stuff that they've shot, right?
Yeah, so there was lots of blue screen driving plates that we needed to fill backgrounds for. So they actually had a kind of stripped down version of a car that was either you know, the height of the charger, the height of the fare lane or whatever. And then it had like a 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 camera array on it, shooting in all directions, including the sky, so that we could just build a 360 of everywhere they were ever driving. And so all of those needed to be pulled as well, spotted and then pulled. Fortunately, the VFX supervisor helped us with picking the pieces because it was like very specific locations in Rome that I didn't know, like, you know, this street is this area, and I'm like, I don't know, I've never been there. So it was helpful for him to pick it for us. But yeah, just like massive amounts of media that we just had to pass on, you know, drone footage for whatever, like just so much stuff.
You mentioned post-viz and pre-viz, I think also, and temps. So can you describe like what those are in terms of like where you are in the process? And
yeah, so we were getting previs. Our post-viz and previs team was the same company, Proof. They were doing previs obviously before they shot, so that was indicating to the people on set how they should shoot and get plates for things. And then the same company would take all of our Avid media. We would actually send them. We would do like an Avid media poll, a DNX. 115 poll for them so that they could work in just our low-res plates so that we could use them for, you know, screenings and just getting a feel for whether or not the action or whatever was working. So we would pull just a ton of the movie got pulled for post-viz, partially for time because we didn't have all that much time to actually temp ourselves. But, it was a lot of like full CG elements or sort of like locations that we didn't have background plates for or whatever, and the post-viz company actually, you know, generated those background plates. So we would get a mix of those because of the different phases that the production was in at the time. We were getting post-viz for one sequence that they had already shot, and we were getting pre-viz for the sequence at the end or something. So yeah, it's sort of a mix of like pre-viz is generally all CG and post-viz is using the Avid media that we have plus CG or just doing a key or something.
And then temps are like stuff that you can do with the Avid media that you have.
Yeah. And we did a whole bunch of that too. We assisted with the driving plates, comps and everything just because there was so much to do in a short period of time.
Yeah. Because I think people don't realize how, you know, when you're trying to watch a cut early on and judge how the the story's going, how it's playing, you need some sort of visual effect element in there just to tell the story of where the cars
Yeah.
are and what they're doing. And
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about how you got to the point where you're working on Fast 10 and doing 3,000 visual effects shots. Where did you get started in the industry? Like, when did you know that this is something you thought you wanted to do?
I feel like it was a pretty streamlined course, actually. Like, I started out as a kid just wanting to do like Sunday morning comics, like The Far Side or something. And so I wanted to do like something with drawing. And then that like kind of led to like 2D animation. And I was dabbling with that. And that was sort of like more challenging maybe for my drawing skills. And so then I went towards like stop motion. And so I love doing, stop motion in my, basement or whatever. And then that kind of led to live action, and then that led to post-production and sort of being the person that everyone, all of my friends who were making shorts or whatever would go to be their editor for. And then just, out of my own necessity, I would do my own like visual effects and motion graphics and stuff. So I kind of just kept going with that, like all through like whatever, middle school to high school to college. And then when I got out of school, it was like, yeah, okay, like I really do enjoy this. I went to school for film, so that's what my degree is in. And so I was just like, all right, let's see what I can do, which was interesting in 2008, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Not a great location, not a great year for job hunting.
Right around the writer's strike and then
Yeah, and
everything
the
else.
whole recession thing.
Yes. So how'd you get from Milwaukee to LA?
Well, I tried to work in Milwaukee, and it was, again, like just that there wasn't really much going on. Like I was doing a lot of production actually. Lots of shows came through to shoot an episode of like Trading Spaces and whatever reality show or something. So I was doing a lot of that, but there's not really a lot of post-production there. So, or at least there wasn't at the time. Actually, the kind of the biggest fish in the pond was Chris Smith, who did American Movie from, I think it was early 2000s, late 90s, something. And so he was actually still in Milwaukee doing work out of his studio there. And I was actually working at a sushi / Hawaiian food kiosk at like a market near their studio. And they came into the market and ordered something on their like LLC, their movie LLC credit card. And I was like, oh, what's this? And they're like, yeah, it's the movie we're working on like over down the street. And I was like, oh, really? And so I started to actually cut their like making of documentary for that movie for a while there. But eventually I kind of, got the itch to branch out and ended up moving to New York, actually. And there I kind of just blanketed the city with my resume and like a really nice cover letter, just sending it to post houses, sending it to like trailer houses and commercial houses just to see if I got any bites. And eventually I got on a bunch of people's like Rolodex. And so I'd get calls for like a 3-day, commercial job and a couple days here loading tapes and stuff for reality and like food TV. Eventually, actually, someone like spotted me on LinkedIn and brought me in at Food Network. That was actually my longest gig was at Food Network. And they found me on LinkedIn somehow, which was awesome and kind of like, I feel like a rare story in our industry anyway.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, it's so awesome that you edit and you do motion graphics and you do visual effects. Like, come on board. And so then I was just loading tapes for like 9 months. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm done now though. It was great, but now I'm done and now I'm gonna move on. And I was always kind of just trying to figure out how to get into features actually, which ultimately you sort of come to realize. And again, it was like at the time, which was 2010 or something, maybe different now, but at the time there wasn't much feature post-production in New York either. So I ended up moving to LA, and I was in talks with John Axelrod, who is just an incredibly nice human being who was willing to just like sort of take me under his wing, like maybe without really intending to, but I just sort of like made it happen. Like I reached out to him because I saw that he was cutting something in New York at the time. And through a long conversation, again through LinkedIn, he was like, "Oh, I'm not, available, or I'm not actually in New York, but if you're ever in LA, like come out and we'll get coffee." And so then I wrote him and I was like, "Oh, coincidentally, I'm gonna be in LA in a couple of weeks." And then I just flew there and had a conversation with him. But he was the one that really told me how to get into the union, actually, because in New York and certainly in Milwaukee, I just didn't know how to get union jobs and how to get in the union. And I was just sort of like, I was like blanketing every email I could find for like a post or sorry, a production email address. Like there used to be this newsletter called Production Weekly. Maybe it still exists actually, but it would have like everything in pre-production and development and stuff. And it would have like a production email that was just like a generic, like, email this probably like intern that's like just starting the pre-production of this movie. And I was like,
Right.
all right, I'm going to email all those people. I don't know. This is like the only way I can think of to like get into features. And that didn't work at all because those people were not either the people hiring post-production or they were not hiring post-production yet at all. And so I was just like spinning my wheels, just like, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do. And so that meeting with John was really eye-opening because he gave me like the rundown of just like, okay, you have to like get your hours on something that qualifies for the union, like a TV show, like a reality TV show or a like indie feature that goes to a festival or whatever. And then get on the roster, which actually in New York is not a thing. So like even if I tried to do that in New York, I wouldn't be able to because the roster doesn't exist. So,
Huh.
get on the roster in LA and then get on a production as like an intern or a PA. And so if they need somebody on that production, they'll bump you up because you're familiar with the project, whatever, and you're rostered. So you're eligible to join the union right away.
Right.
So ultimately, when I was driving across country after I decided to move, he actually emailed me and was like, "Oh, we need an intern on this feature I'm starting. Are you interested?" So I drove across country and immediately started working with John on this movie. It was called Gone, and it was actually a lakeshore production, which was hilarious because they did the movie Crank, and my ringtone at the time was the Crank ringtone. It's like doo 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 doo, and so every time it rang there, everyone was like, "What's happening?" So confused, and I was like, "Yep, it's just me, just a fan."
That's
So
so
yeah,
funny.
I worked with John, and then he put me up for a union gig as an apprentice on something, and just sort of like went on and on from there. And then like basically I sort of position myself as like the VFX specialist, I guess, motion graphics specialist on the team, because I'd be like the third assistant editor and like didn't have much else to do really. So they'd be like, do these temps, do these graphics, like temp something up. So I ended up just doing a lot of that. And so then I kind of became known as like the person that does visual effects and things like that. So that's how I kind of like steered into the visual effects realm. And I just really like being kind of in the single department actually, instead of as an assistant editor where you are like sort of the go-between of sound and music and visual effects and like, all these different things. It's kind of nice to just be in one department and just focus.
It is. Yeah, I'm doing that sort of for the first time right now, and it's lovely to not deal with all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Was VFX something that you knew you wanted to get into, or was it like, this is something I'm good at, and so I'm gonna sort of put myself over here?
Yeah, I think that was more the latter, that I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily go in planning to do visual effects per se, but I realized that I have an affinity for it and that I'm good at it and I really enjoy it. And that there was sort of this need in the industry as well for more visual effects editor. So it's kind of like as that was ramping up was when I was getting more into it, sort of. So it sort of just like flowed nicely into it. And I found that it was like a really useful skill to have, basically.
I want to back up real quickly because it sounds like John Axelrod was like a big bump for you. Like without that step, all this other stuff would have come some other way, but it might have taken longer. So, I mean, he was probably cutting like We Own the Night or something he's not.
Yeah.
He's a well-known editor who a lot of people have a similar story with. He seems to be very amenable to meeting people. But how did you manage to get connected with him in the first place?
I just cold messaged him on LinkedIn.
Wow, LinkedIn. It's good enough for Food Network.
Once again, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was working for me, I guess. Because I also had like IMDb Pro and other ways that I could find like direct contact. That was also another sort of aha moment, was realizing I needed to go directly to editors rather than other random crew like in production. Like obviously they were not going to be the ones that were hiring me, but I didn't really know who, and it turned out it was more like the editor will directly hire their crew. So I started reaching out to editors directly. And I think honestly, like he was working in a building that I was working in for some reality show. And I think I probably, because there was also a phase of this where I just slid my resume under doors of people and with like my business card and was like, here you go. Which I don't know if that helped or hurt me, if they were just like, what the hell is this? But maybe they were amused at least and were just like, I like her gumption or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so I think I actually slid my resume under his door at one point too. But I don't think that, like, I don't know if that was ever referenced, like when we were actually messaging on LinkedIn at all.
That's one thing that I think with people working from home more often now, and I worked from home for a while. It was lovely, but you don't have that opportunity to kind of run into people who are working on other things. It's such a small crew usually with editorial. You're kind of off by your own. And I think initially, like, we probably first met or like knew of each other because we were working in the same facility, at least as far as I can remember. And then, saw each other at some kind of industry get together. But yeah, I mean, I think it's super helpful to just say hello to the people who are down the hall, and you never know when you might end up, they might need to hire somebody.
Yeah, which is pretty highly likely, to be honest. I feel like I've worked with a ton of people who I just met in the halls. Or I worked on a movie where the producer one day was like, look what I found. And it was one of my random cold emails from a movie that she was producing like forever ago, probably like a decade ago, that I had emailed the production office via Production Weekly and wrote my whole spiel of like, I'm like fresh out of college and I've done all these things, blah, 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 please hire me. And she was like, look what I found. Isn't that hilarious? So like, ironically, not that that helped me at all, but like maybe it endeared me to her after she saw that I had emailed her long, long ago. So, I mean, you never know what connections you make will like pay off later or who you'll work with later.
That's so true. Speaking about like the early stuff and the later stuff, like what are the biggest differences between those early movies you're doing and what you're doing now? Because I think people think that big studio movies, everything's just like totally different. How could I ever work on something like that without tons of experience?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, some of that is true, but it's all like the base layers, everything that you've done before. So all the skills that I use for the smaller projects are the same skills that I use for the larger projects, but it's just more like it's, I was, I think the first movie that I was a VFX editor on, I probably tracked everything in like Google Docs just because there was like 300 shots or whatever, not even like 200 shots. And it was like one vendor and not a big deal at all. I feel like as it grows, you have to get more creative with organizing and coordinating, because there's just so many more people involved, so many more vendors involved, so many more crew, so many more shots. So it's like, all right, now we need a more robust system of tracking. We need a better like FileMaker program. Most people who work in visual effects use FileMaker, like something that they built or something that they bought. That's like a plugin overlay FileMaker. And so it's like, all right, we need that. We need to have more information, because when they ask us details, we need to like spit it out, give it to them. Or just like we were using several different like coordination tools, because we were getting, seemed like hundreds of requests every day. And so it was like, okay, not only is it impossible to keep track of, but it's like, what's the priority anymore? Like you're starting something and then you get 50 more things. It's like, what should I stop and do the new things, or what am I doing? So we used something that was called Tick Tick. That was like it's like a to-do list, but it was nice because you can invite people to it, and then you can assign people to things, and you can set priority, and just like people can claim it and, sort it out that way. Add comments, add notes, link emails, blah, blah, blah. And then on the VFX coordinator side, we actually had something that one of our coordinators had designed, which was actually a Google Doc spreadsheet, where basically all of the coordinators would input their requests from their vendors into there, in addition to sending an email, because then usually we just respond to the email. So it's all kind of like kept in one thread. But the system that she had built was similarly like, there was a priority set, which was key. Like we needed them to tell us what was most important, and then we could put our names on it, so we could say like, I'm grabbing this, and then we could say it's in progress, or we're waiting on something, or whatever. So we just sort of, as you expand, you just need more tools to help you out, because it just gets overwhelming. Like it's when you get 50 emails an hour or whatever it is, it's like, what, you just sort of get bogged down and freeze at just like the sheer amount of stuff to do.
Right.
And the editorial team was larger, and so there were 4 editors, there were 4 assistants, and they're all coming with questions, and I'm pointing people in directions of things. So it's just like, it's just so hectic, and there's just so many players that you really have to have your stuff organized. So I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing, is like, you just have to get more creative and more organized as you get bigger, because there's just so many spinning plates at all times, like at all times.
Yeah. It really sounds like you're just talking about like databases and like ways of focusing your work on getting stuff done, more than like developing super CG skills, or the kinds of things that people might think you would need to know. But
oh yeah, no. I mean, honestly, the busier and the bigger it is, I feel like actually the less temps I do, because then it becomes like, I can't even do it. Like it's like a 3D full CG, moving in 3D space, rather like just like something that if I tried, it would take too long and look like garbage. So might as well have like the professionals do a version of it.
Right.
And we had a team that was also in-house that we could send stuff to as well. So we gave them post-phase to do, and like the assistant editors were helping, and like, because it was just like so much that, much as I would love to have done all of the temps, it just would have taken up so much of our time. I would say like, as the job gets bigger, it's not like it's the duties are harder. It's just more the management of being able to achieve them all, because you're now getting so many. It's like on a smaller project, it's like, okay, like do this one sort of difficult temp, and you've got 3 days to do it, and that's the only thing you have to do. But on this, it's like you have that, plus you have 50 requests of like QuickTime references, and they're looking for this plate, and like we need elements for potential like 2D face replace, and we need, look for this, look for that, do that, asking questions. People are at my door every day, or every minute rather, and it's just like, not so much that but the work gets harder, it just gets more complicated to do it all effectively.
Yeah. And the pressure's on you to make sure it all gets done and nothing slips through the cracks. And if there's a screening and the shots aren't ready, they come to you to ask why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Before we go, do you have any stories about working in the industry that people might be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I worked at a movie theater, and as I was sweeping up all the popcorn, the credits were rolling for Anchorman over and over and over. Like, I kept having to go in at the end of the movie and sweep it up. And so I got really familiar with all of the like outtakes and stuff. And then cut to like 6 or 7 years later, and I'm now working with that crew on my first union job, and I'm like quoting those random like bloopers with the editor, just like we're all just like loving it because they're so hilarious, and he's reminiscing and I'm reminiscing in a different way, and it was just like super crazy to be in the room with them. And then like a few years after that, even, I was working on Anchorman 2. So it was like the most bizarre, just like through line of like, here I am cleaning up people's garbage in a movie theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, watching the end of Anchorman over and over every day. And then getting to work with that same team on Anchorman 2 and have like a preview screening go really great and have like Adam McKay and Will Ferrell and Judd Apatow all tell me how awesome my like temp was because it like slayed in the screening and made everyone laugh, and it's just like so awesome.
What was the temp? Do you remember?
It was during the first confrontation with Ron Burgundy and his nemesis Jack Lime in Anchorman 2. It's a throwback to the original one, but like it pushes in on his eye and there's like an explosion, and then the guy from like Jean-Claude Van Damme from Bloodsport is like screaming.
All right, guys, that's enough.
That was the temp that I did. And basically the VFX house just did the same temp that I did. So that's how it ended, was like my basic design.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Kim, for taking the time to talk with us, and good luck with everything else. Do you know what's happening next for you?
I don't know. I mean, right now I'm off, which is nice, and just kind of taking a breather, because that one was a big one. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see with the writer's strike what happens and what comes around. And see, I'm really interested in what the writer's strike like brings to the forefront and how that affects us, actually, because I feel like a lot of it has to do with AI and visual effects too, actually. So it'll be interesting. So we'll see how kind of everything shakes out.
Yeah.
See what comes up out of it.
Let's hope it all turns out in a way that preserves creative work for creative people and lets you keep organizing lots of shots.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kim Huston. I think anyone looking to break into Hollywood should pay attention to the way Kim took opportunities when they presented themselves, even if it meant that she had to pretend that she was going to be in Los Angeles and then book a flight just to go have coffee with someone. Please subscribe so you'll get future episodes, and if you have any suggestions about people you'd like to see interviewed in the future, please go to hollywoodonramp.net/podcast and contact us there. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.